Okay, so I think you could see there how what I was saying about the lines disappearing. So it all just becomes paint and it gets quite hard to see what you're doing. So that's one of the challenges. So less is more sometimes, but I've kind of gotten a little bit used to it. And like I said, if mistakes happen, we can sort them out. Let me just have a little look at the questions. So just to catch up with the questions that we had during that, and then I'm going to move on to talking about some other types of designs, because obviously you guys kind of shared some of yours with me. So Mel says the video doesn't show you marking out, it's a shorter visual, which I didn't really understand. So you can help me with that one. That would be awesome. If you mean the black at the bottom and the full design, is that perhaps what you meant? Let me know so I can help with that one. And hopefully, Kylie, a question about sealing the tape with the top coat or base colour is a bit clearer now, because I thought I'd wing it with mine, but it is really, really grainy. You can hear your nails going through the openness of the grain on this. So that's why I changed. After I've done the first bit, because I've not used the metallic paint before, and I thought, hang on, I'm going to use the top coat to seal this, because I do not want to be picking bits of tape paint off this whole design, because it's very intricate. So as you saw there, I painted over the whole thing just so that it ended up with like maybe shiny a bit next to the tape when I put more layers of satin on later. And the reason I don't put the top coat on top of the black instead of paint on top of the black is that the top coat's not going to absorb in, whereas it will absorb into the wood and leave the wood still quite rough, whereas with the paint it starts to create a shinier layer, which is not what I want to paint on top of, ideally. But Mel, if you could just let me know a little bit more about the marking out bit, I can always talk about it now as well. Oh, we've got some more questions. Let me just have a little look. What thin brushes do I use? Sorry, this is a material supply list. I've just bought these just a set of artist brushes. Actually, that's got a slightly strange, as you can see, it's slightly strange. But these are just out of an artist set. So a little square, what's that, 1/2 inch brushes. Yeah, so sometimes you get them in a mixed set, sometimes you can get them on their own, but they're about 1/2 inch. I have got some smaller ones, this sort of size, doing the little tiny fine lines. So pretty cost effective, and they're the same kind of that soft gold tackle-on type of thing. You don't need to get like squirrels or sable or anything. They are synthetic, but they're really soft. The modelling thin tape is called Tamiya. That again is on the supply list, and there might be links as well, but I generally look around Amazon, eBay. Hobbycraft sell it, but obviously I don't know if they're posting out or what they're doing. Obviously not open at the moment, and I don't know if that's the right way around. Where's the camera? Got my questions in the right way. Can you see that? It's back to front. Tamiya. Tamiya. But yes, it's in the supplies list. And so it comes in 1, 2, 3, 6, and 10. And I think actually, there's a 16 as well. So that sort of bridges that gap, 16. But as you might have seen here underneath my bum, you can cut these tapes. You just need to be quite careful when you're cutting tapes down to be accurate. But it's perfectly doable if you've got bog tape at home and you can't get hold of the stuff quickly or easily. And I actually have run out of, although I just found that one, I did run out of the 6, so I've cut some up by dividing that in half, and then half of the halves again to get to 6 mil. So there are ways and means around it. Measuring right up to the top of the cabinet. Yeah, no. So all I was doing in that was marking a central line from, and my design, as you can probably see there, doesn't go to the top of the cabinet. But what I was using the top of the cabinet to hook the T-square on. So I was just using the top of the cabinet itself to anchor that to give me a straight line. so that the line coming down would be a right angle to it. So I also used it that way around against the bottom of the door. So I was drawing the line down, see that the red starts down. And obviously the main bit of setting this out came in the painting video when I did that. But yeah, there's that's probably sort of the biggest way that I'd line stuff up is literally finding central points, drawing out lines. Sometimes you go as far as drawing a grid, which can be quite useful for doing chevrons and zigzags. You might draw a grid, and then you've got the alignment between the it sort of lines up with the piece of furniture. And like, for example, I was saying about doing a diamond, you just mark out the middle of the top, the middle of the sides, and connect those up to make your diamond. And these sort of shapes, because they work within the dimensions of the piece, they're particularly pleasing, I think. It's all sort of balanced. No, that's quite all right. Sorry, I didn't understand. If need any more explanation, just let me know. Which top coats? At the moment I'm using this one because General Finishes didn't have stock. So I'm using Little Fairs, which comes like this. It's little and then fairs, like the fun fair. And this is satin. But it's pretty much the same as General Finishes. You could use Polyvine. And to be quite honest, I possibly would have just not used that watered down because my grain was so open. I think it needed a little bit more to fill some of those gaps and to keep that tape closed. But the rest of it, the bit that's sealed, is so much more precise. So I don't need to fix it up, hopefully. Black at the bottom of the piece is what you're planning to. I think it's nice. It sort of anchors it. I'm kind of often doing metallic legs, so it's quite nice not to do that. Oh, good. I'm glad you understand. No, all top coats are not water-based, but most of the products I use are water-based, and I think most professionals nowadays tend to use water-based. There are some oil-based finishes, as in varnishes and oils in themselves, and hybrid oil varnishes that people use to protect the furniture. But most top coats that I use are water-based. It's just more pleasant to work with. The only real difference, the only real oil-based one that I know is very prevalent in the industry is Pollux oil that people are using to nourish and finish up their wood. So that's yeah, Polyvine, absolutely fine. Yeah. So I just wanted to run you through some other styles, because obviously here what I've got is stripes, effectively, but broken stripes into chevrons, and I'm just filling in the gaps between them. I'm not having to lay something more complicated across the piece. So I just wanted to sort of take you through some of the techniques for that. And just give you a bit of an insight into some of my layouts so you can kind of sort of see it down. So it's quite a hard thing to do in a demo because, as you probably understand, these things take quite a long time to do. Yeah, that probably took me about, I don't know, 6 hours end to end. So it's not something you want to sit and watch really. So it's just to give you a flavour of what a layout would look like. So I'll just share again. Let's just double check I'm not missing any questions. I'll keep my eyes on it. Let's just share again. And then, okay, go down, go down. There we go. So this is one of the first, what I call fine line designs. Well, one of the first ones I did, and it certainly wasn't sort of a prevalent style then at all. So there were geometric designs around, but doing this very sort of fine banding that almost looked like brass was a pretty novel thing then. And I know this sort of design looks quite naive now compared to how sophisticated people have got with, you know, the sort of designs they do. And obviously some of the designs that we're all intending to do on this course are a lot more intricate. But at the time, this was quite different. But it takes a specific technique to get that sort of all lined up and to sort of lay it out like that across wood. Because obviously there's nowhere else to go, that you can't put any of the paint down, you're going straight over the wood. And so the way that I do that is what I've sort of nicknamed an outline style. So effectively I'm creating the reverse in masking tape. So each line is actually 2 lines of tape with a channel in the middle. So it is like the chevron, except it's sort of more free sort of formed. It's not actually sitting against any other lines that you can kind of work from. So you have to really, just move on to the next slide. You have to really sort of work out your layout on this. So this is the same design, but done probably about a year later on another cabinet and expanded. So it doubled down because of the height of the cabinet. So it's the same idea. It's diamonds with diamonds coming in from the sides. And what I'm doing is actually creating, like I say, the opposite. So you can actually see the gap is the design that's going to sort of appear afterwards. So it does involve a little bit of thinking in reverse, and which not everybody can do. So I'm going to show you a couple of other ways that, you know, if you think that befuddles my brain. But I would say, give it a try though, because you might find once you start laying it down, it's easier than you think. The key thing here is, for me, you have to set some part of the design, and then the rest comes off it as parallel. So for me, what I did was I created a template for this central diamond. I don't know if you can see my cursor. I hope you can. Can you just let me know if you can't? Because I'm pointing at things you can't see. And so the central diamond at the top, I would create literally a template, and then I'd tape around it. And then the rest of the taping is lines coming off that. So you're just running parallels. And then what I'm doing is, somebody was asking earlier about lining things up. So I can obviously repeat that top diamond down at the bottom, make sure I've got the right size. But by running those lines off, I'm then using things like a long ruler to make sure that the points of things are in the same position vertically as I look at it. So I'll use literally like a guide stick or a ruler, hold it up against the piece and just check things are lined up and that they're coming off at the same point. So if it's 1 centimetre in from the side of the cabinet here, it's the same 1 centimetre in further down. So it's not like nano measurements. It's not like really, you know, measured out to the nth degree, but it's about checking in and checking that things line up and things are going off at the same point. You know, like if I've taped in the corner, it's in the corner on the other side as well. And that stuff can really keep everything lined up. Let's just check. I've got something in there. There are other ways to do this. So what I'm doing here is I'm using a piece of tape, as I talked about in the video, and I'm using that same piece of tape. Well, after a while, I get a fresh piece because it doesn't stick anymore. But I'm using that piece of tape and I'm moving it around the piece to keep that gap consistent. So I'm sort of, like I say, I'm working in the reverse. Once you start to lay one line down, or you get, like, if I've got this central diamond down by literally sticking a piece of cardboard there, taping around it, then taping the inside line around it, you can start then to work out from that. Another way to do it, if you find this too much for your brain, this is a friend of mine, Emma, who does Design Retro Brighter, who does this her signature style, and she does hers line by line, and it's very accurate and it's very fine. And you imagine trying to cut the gaps between this. So what I do with mine is I actually cut away all of the overlaps so that my paint line is continuous in the colour that I'm using. So it's all got to be one colour. Although the bits that don't interlink could be a different colour, but the bits that overlap are all the same colour, so that the line is continuous and the metallic continues on. I actually cut into all of the sections and remove the tape, whereas Emma actually applies them section by section, and on very fine lines, which are almost maybe a millimetre, that works brilliantly. The only difference is you will see a little bit where the tape, where the painted lines, you will see that where they overlap because there's different layers of paint there. But that's one thing you can do, which is really effective. And, you know, you wouldn't want to cut away between all of that and lay that in one go. I think you'd find it wouldn't be as perfect and neat as it is there. So you could do it bit by bit. It's slower, but it's easier. But a hairdryer can speed it up. You can just, you know, do one line, you know, do all the diagonals one way, all the diagonals the other way, all the horizontals, and blasting with a hairdryer in between could speed it up quite considerably. So you can see how that could be created quite easily and quite accurately. And these are a couple of examples I want to throw out there for anybody who's thinking, you know, perhaps they want to freestyle it a bit and they don't want to get too caught up in the geometry of it. And this is a nice style where you're just throwing down fine lines and they overlap. So you might do, you know, maybe one on each drawer and then another one on each drawer until you get these nice overlaps, and then you come back and you fill it in afterwards and you add You just basically outline the overlap sections and add some paint in, and you get these nice interplays of tape and colour, and very free form, and just letting it sort of develop. Yeah, you can plan that out beforehand as well, but this kind of technique allows you just to do it as you go, and filling the space. You know, as you stand back and look at it, you can think, oh, I'll put a bit more colour there and a bit more colour there. So there's more than one way to do things, and I think it's really about hopefully getting some enjoyment out of it and not getting too stressed. So if you need to, take a little bit away from your design so you can enjoy it a bit more. So I'm going to show you another way of doing the style that I do, but making it a bit easier for yourself. So this is, I hate this view actually because it looks like they don't line up properly. It looks like the same style as the diamonds design that I just showed you, but actually I created this in a different way, which instead of using a guide piece of tape and purely doing an outline so that you filled it in and you just had to see everything back to front, I started by laying out the design, the gold, effectively gold lines in masking tape. So this is a technique that you might find helps you first time around to plan your design. And then what you do is so this is me, this is the thin Tamiya masking tape, and I've laid out my design. But obviously that's not going to create my gold lines. I need to then outline it. So I'm basically laying it all out. And the reason I did that was because this piece had a huge pattern that went all the way around the side, and it just felt like a headache to try and do it the other way. So the end result, as you can see there, is the same as that diamond design. And all I've done is gone in, masked off, and then taken off the thin tape. Now it's more wasteful of tape, obviously, and it does mean doing twice as much taping to some extent, but it allows you to plan your design using that thin tape. And obviously, if you're not doing it as much as this, you wouldn't be using as much tape as me, but it's, you know, it's something to consider. But just go back to that, is laying it out with your thin tape. Similarly, you could do this by drawing it out with chalk and taping around it if you want to, so that you get that idea of where you're going, and then start to put your masking tape in that you can paint around. And the reason why this is thick masking tape is because it's so much easier to paint. As you know, heard me talking about painting narrow, I wouldn't think about masking this with narrow tape. I'd go straight for the thick frog tape, because it's just much easier to fill in afterwards without having to worry about being so precise. Let me just check in the chat. Victoria says it sounds more agreeable with her brain. Yeah, I mean, some of this is it's hard to talk about it because it becomes theoretical. So really, I'm going to say that it's getting in there and having a go, and it might be that you lay it out, and then next time around you might, because you've got more of a feel for it, you might try and freestyle it with the gaps, and just use a little piece of tape to guide you rather than using, you know, a full piece of tape. This is another idea. This is the only example I've got of it to share with you, but this is where I've actually painted that gold first. So, because it's a very regular pattern, really hard to lay that out, really hard to cut it all precisely like that. And really, wouldn't you probably just use a stencil? But obviously I wanted to custom fit this to this particular piece, and I wanted to do something that nobody else had done, because obviously stencils are, you know, somebody else could buy it and use it as well. So what I've done here is I actually painted the doors gold, and then masked off in masked off the design, so the fine lines, which was much easier to lay lots of lines down and make that geometric grid sort of deco pattern, and then paint the whole lot grey over the top and then peel the tape back. So that's possible also. The only thing about that is it's twice as much painting, you know, and it doesn't obviously work with wood. You can't do this with wood. You've got to do the outline method for wood, because you haven't got another layer of paint to put down. You're going straight onto the wood surface. So that's something you could do. You can obviously paint something first and then mask off your little tiny lines and then paint again if you really want to. But it's not a technique I really use very often, except for repetitive patterns like that. I just put these in because I just wanted to show you, if you fancy doing anything that looks as amazing as this is actually quite painstaking and is created by literally creating a grid and taping off. It looks like it, you know, you wouldn't get a masking tape reveal out of that, because it's just, there's lots and lots of tape on and off and on and off, and you just literally going around, taping around each element and filling it in, and then moving on to the next one. And obviously pieces next to each other will have to be painted separately. So it's quite time consuming, and it's worth it at the end, obviously, when you look at that. And again, this is where a hairdryer is really useful. When you're working, you can get through those coats quicker and get on to the next taping. There's just a couple of mine where I've had to do that technique, where you've got colours next to each other, you've got to go back in. So that didn't look like that when I finished painting it. There was more wood, and I went back and added some extra bands to fill it out. And I think that's something to bear in mind is, you can go back in and add more later. So both of these designs, the one I've been working on this week and the one in the demo there, I will stand back, and if I need to add a little bit more in, I can, because there might be tape in the way, then or I want to break it up, or I want to add a little bit more in. Let's just have a little look. Well, yes, Kylie's saying, wonder how did that blue and gold cut to the corner. That definitely would have worked in the outline technique that I usually use, but it was also a chance for me to try this style, which I know a lot of other people use, and I just thought it might actually be a little bit less of a headache. Because it goes over curved surfaces and round and different levels. I just thought, wow, that might actually be a bit easier. Plus, I also hadn't worked out what I was doing on the sides, so I needed to sort of let it flow around the outsides. Yeah, so all right, with time, let me just check. All right, good for questions. So just going to run through some of the, I might come back to that one because I've got some boards here that I'm going to have a little look at. We'll come on to, oh gosh, sorry, I can't remember whose this is. I'm terribly sorry. So this is, yeah, somebody put this, somebody telling me. So this is similar to what I was talking about with the diamond design, and you are going to need to tape. So you could put tape down to tape around, first of all, to sort of get your symmetry right. And obviously this is going to be quite easy once you've got your first lines going from sort of, you sort of set up from here down to the bottom, find your central points, and mark one and the other out. But what I would say is, for me, this would have to be done in 2 separate tapings in order to get the 2 colours, because you'll have tape sitting on top of where one of the colours. You can't really cut away in this sort of design because it's not one colour. So cutting away allows to do one colour continuous. So you could let them overlap, but the problem with that is you'd end up with a little bit of tape sitting on top of the bottom colour, and it would be the wood. So you're better to do all the gold and then come back and add all the blue, for example, in a separate taping. But it should be easy because you can just use the symmetry and the lines of the original gold that you've already put down to follow and to add those in, if that makes sense. And then Carrie's sideboard. So again, Carrie could lay this out like I did my sideboard. She could put down the lines first with thin tape just to check the symmetry and make sure she was happy with them, and then start to tape around, a bit like I've done here. So this is a sort of similar idea, which I didn't do by taping first. I went straight down with my tape with the gap, just using reference points, so the center of the drawers. And this was sort of maybe 3 inches in from each door where those lines go down to the center of there. So it's just finding yourself points. Having a design for this beforehand meant I've got something to refer to, and I can just line things up. So again, I can use a ruler to line up, make sure these are in the same place, and that certain points are in the same place. But I'm just using a tiny piece of tape there just to make sure everything's lined up. The masking tape does quite a bit of the work in terms of lining things up. This is a bit of a closer up of it. And you just need to make sure that your lines go directly down the middle of other lines so that you get that nice symmetry. That one is off a little bit there to my eye, but I think I echoed it on the other door. But you want to just make sure you're splitting other lines when you're crossing and intersecting things. And then again, oh gosh, I've got a bit of a blank about who's this who. I'm sorry about that. So we've got some squares going on here and some curves as well. So I want to just kind of I'll show you the curved stuff in a second. And this sort of reminds me of this design that I did, where you're sort of laying the tape out, but actually cutting into it to make the squares. So it's really nice and straightforward to do, actually, because you're following the lines of the piece, and then you're cutting your sort of parallels in. So I think that should be nice and straightforward to do as an outline style, directly onto the piece and cutting away. If these are, it might be worth overlaying the curved bits at the end separately, potentially, because it could be a bit complicated with cutting away, but there's more than one way to do things, that's for sure. And then, so Donna's cabinet. So I'm going to show you the stuff around the curves. I know you've got a question around the curves here on the side and how to get those working. Your design at the bottom is you could quite straightforwardly do that with tape overlapping and then cutting away. So here's one I did earlier. So overlapping the tapes, and what you can see here is literally cutting away that where the tapes have overlapped, so that they so that you end up with them all converging together beautifully, like so. And again, that's where it's quite important that you bring your tape, your line down and sort of evenly between the other two lines, so that they're sort of, so that they're nice and symmetrical, like so. Right, so I was just going to grab some stuff here and have a little look at a couple of these things here in terms of laying them out. And I know, oh, is this Donna's? Sorry, I'm terribly sorry. I'm getting a bit forgetful this evening in the process of trying to remember. A lot of these designs, Suzanne, I'm getting confused. Let's just have a little look. Okay, sorry, I thought I had a question pop up there. So a lot of these here would have to be done in two sections, to my mind. The ones where they've got two colours, you'd have to come back in and do the base colour first, and then come back in and tape over the top in order to get that separate colour on the top, like that. Same with the sort of zigzags. Do the base, maybe the gold first, and then add the blue over the top. You might be able to, with one of these two, come up with a way of doing them at the same time, but there would be a bit of tape in the way of each other. So if you introduce some gaps where there's more navy peeping through between the blue, pale blue, and the yellow, you could tape it in one go. But the best thing to do would be to break that up into two sections, I think. Right, let's just see where we're going. Let's just have a little look at the tapes and the boards. Let's just see what we're doing. Okay, so let's just grab something. Doing your fine line, overlaps and cutting. I'll just do a quick little close-up of that so we've got it, because obviously I'm conscious that the let's just do, and if you want to shout any questions or anything you want me to show you, I'm just going to put the other camera on. Hopefully it works. There we go. It's got sound. I don't want it to have sound. Right, best laid plans and all that. Okay, so I can hear that. I do apologise. Right, have we got feedback? No. Okay, I was trying to make it a bit easier for you to see because I don't think it's that easy to see on that camera. So this is a sort of example of marking out. So I found the midpoint, used a chalk line so that I can make sure that my angles are absolutely spot on. And I've just used a little piece of tape as a spacer, basically, and then made sure that I overlap them perfectly. And then what I often look for is the where they overlap is perfectly symmetrical. So you get a diamond where things overlap, and then you can tell you're going to get a really nice, perfect point. But I'm also looking that it's lining up along that line as well. So just do a little bit of taping and cutting in a bit more of a close-up way so you can see it. And like I said, this is how I tend to do my fine line stuff with a, let's do it that way first, with a wide tape, because it's much easier to paint. It's only when you want a narrow gap between that I would use a narrow tape. But with something like this, I'm not painting anything else, so that's not long enough. And then, so this is where I can just take some tape if I want to, and just pop it in there. Let's just sit down. Getting flustered. And then I usually stick it at one end, checking that that angle lines up there, up to the tape. And then again, a little wrinkle, which you don't need. Any little wrinkles. And then I'll take that out. Get it out. So just again from the line to the line. Oops. I'll try and eyeball that, but that's a bit naughty, isn't it? So I use the tape again. So that's how I do it. Just pop it down as I go and then angle it into play. So it's, once you get the hang of it, it is quite easy to tape without anything down first. But it is really about linking up the points you've already set out. And then if I'm going to cut that excess away, I'm just going to use a clear ruler, move it down, and then get a little bit of tape there, and then need to cut both sides here. And that's like that. Let's just in. Oh, nobody else came. Cool. Okay. So that's the secret to fine line, really. So you're just going to be throwing up, you know, if you wanted to do another set of lines, I'd be throwing up a point, measuring in from here, maybe measuring in from there, putting it down. Everything runs parallel. Once you start to get the basic setup, it's pretty easy. She says. This is the idea of working over a. So this is one of the designs actually that one of the ladies has popped in. Again, finding my central points and making sure that the amount that the line sort of is below there is the same as it's there. And this is the idea, this is gold. So I could actually lay my design, add on the final bits that I want to add on, which are actually, just show you here, I've actually created some on the mat by putting the tape down on the guidelines and cutting it so I can get my own narrow tape, like so. And so I can use those, ooh, I'm a bit more careful with it. I can use those to link up and create, now I can't remember what the shape was actually that was in the design. Let's just see. It was, oh, I see, yeah. Echoing the same, basically. which looked complicated to cut away. So I thought perhaps it would be easier to lay it out like this rather than having to cut away lots of little squares. I'll flick it back up in a minute. So again, I'm just eyeballing the widths on this, but I can also tell because this is a symmetrical shape here and there, and all the points line up like so. So it's simple but effective, lining everything up like so. You can see we're working off that. And then if I paint over the top of this with a colour, peel it all back, I've got a nice gold design done in a slightly different way. So again, I don't know if I'm actually doing this the same way as the design, but you get the idea. The little narrow tapes do bend a bit, so I tend to stick them at one end and then angle them and then use a spacer normally, because they can bend a lot more. You can get a little bit of a curve out of them. But so that's that anyway. If you are looking to do curves specifically, you will want to get hold of either something like this, which is this is by Tamiya also, but it's vinyl, so it stretches. Can you see? And it allows you to stretch it around curves. It's called for curves, and so you just see that in effect. So if I wanted to curve in, so this would be great for the masking off that you wanted to do on. So just use your fingers, stretching it into place. I mean, it's not perfect what I'm doing. You might want to put your curve down first, and obviously if you're doing a piece of furniture, you've got a curve. I'm just making one up. So you can go quite tight with it. Not ideal, but you know what I mean. But that's going to be fiddly to paint. So you can come behind it and do some masking. You know, just using small pieces of tape. You can actually do a masked curved edge with tiny pieces of tape. Some people actually cut the back of the tape, so it allows it to bend round. That's another way to do it. But with this, you could actually just put small pieces of tape behind the curve so that you can paint it a little bit more easily. If you're obviously doing shapes as opposed to just getting a nice curved edge, you would obviously, you know, you could use more of this tape to go around. That's one way to get, you could probably get a circle out of that as well. But there are other ways to do circles and curves. There is another tape by Tessa, which is curved tape. I've not had the best luck with it, but it's just be aware it's out there. It's a bit more like crepey, so you have to stretch it into place. But I found it a little bit hardcore, so it might be better for wood as opposed to paint in terms of its stick. So that's how I would do that. Obviously, if you're going to be painting a shape in there, you wouldn't do it with this necessarily. You want to maybe do this. You can always double this up, make a thicker band with it, which I often do with the little Tamiya tapes. I want to vary my tapes widths. They'll just use 2 lots of that side by side. If you're wanting to do circles or arches, so maybe something a little bit more specifically rounded than this, because that's just freestanding, you could use, the simplest option is to create yourself, you could use rows and rows of masking tape like this on your piece, and then you could just cut around something. Very, very simple. So you could just, you can either cut around it, or you could first of all draw around it, and then you can peel away the rest of the tape. So very, very simple. Or if you were trying to do concentric circles and you wanted to do them different colours, you could make sure you could use something like a cutting compass. So that would allow you to actually cut, make sure I go the right way, to actually cut your shape as you want to. Now it's only so big, but it will give you a, get in there. We've already seen my nails are very short at the moment, which is a bit of a hindrance for masking tape, it has to be said, because you feel like you're picking. But you can get some lovely curved shapes from that, which you can link up with other geometrics, but it's only so big. So a really nifty technique, if you wanted to do simple again, surprising how simple a lot of these things are, would be just to literally use a pencil and a tack. And you could do this on your furniture, and it's literally to hold that in place and to draw your circle. So if you're doing an arch, you could, put this in here and draw your shape. That allows you then to move it down and to get a concentric circle. Obviously, you can do them different sizes from that, but that's quite a nice way of getting circles. And then what you then do is cut it by hand. So draw it and then cut it by hand afterwards. That's what I would do, certainly. But yeah, making templates I find is quite useful, and I do use this technique on the cutting mat actually. So sometimes you could put all this tape on your piece, cut the shape you wanted. So if you want to do wiggles or waves, you could cut them out, draw them on, cut them out, and then paint them in. But another technique that I've used before is to actually, I would stick and create, wanted to do stars that were all the same shape. So this is really good, like for difficult shapes to do, like hexagons and stars, is to have a template and cut it out, and then you can take the tape off the mat. Now the way that I've laid this out on purpose, she says, obviously not, I've laid it out so that they actually overlap. I won't be able to do this now because I'm talking at the same time. And I've actually done a huge piece here, but when I was doing my stars, they were only about that big. But the idea is you can take them off because they overlap. You can cut out a shape and then you can take it over and stick it on your piece and paint it in. So you're kind of making a little freestyle stencil as you go if you want to do specific shapes on your piece. Okay, has anybody got any questions? Anything you'd like me just to quickly show you? Or have I left you all slightly bamboozled at this point? Do I sound callback between coats? I do, but only in that kind of that way, in a light kind of way, because you'll actually be able to feel the paint coats have got a little bit of a prickle. You'll be able to feel they're not super smooth, just stuck in the air and what have you. But yeah, but just with a fine pad, I'll just give it a little whiz over. But if there's any bits that I think, oh, I've just left a little blob of paint there or something, then I'll use a slightly coarser one and just smooth it. So that's your opportunity to get it feeling perfectly smooth. It tends to go dull after sanding. It does, exactly right. And so this is the same as with the metallics. I don't sand on the last coat, but only between coats. With coal black, if I know I'm going to be top coating, which most of the time I do, if I know I'm going to be top coating, I will sand on the last coat, because when it's dull, as soon as you put your top coat on, it just comes back to life. So don't worry about that sanding. The only difference in that is metallics. If you sand metallics on the last go and then put top coat on, they don't pop back to life because you sort of sanded off some of the glitter effectively, or the reflectiveness, and the top coat can't put that back. But what it can do is it completely takes the dustiness out of wood, and believe me, it just pops back. A good way of showing you it here actually on the ooh, why is that showing that? That's my on the presentation was the door that I was doing. Find it. I don't know if I can actually. That looks pretty dusty actually, and then looks lovely and glossy by the end. Yeah, so don't worry about sanding if you know you're going to be top coating of a regular paint anyway. If it's metallics, then I'd say that's a different story. Let's just okay. Yeah, so when you're cutting, you don't necessarily need to be like really worried about cutting into the wood. I do think you can hear it cutting the tape. And you don't want to be pushing really hard. What I would do is I push really hard with my ruler. So I hold that really tight because I don't want that to move, because that's when I get funny cuts. And that's when you could end up like, if you don't cut it smoothly, that you'll be able to see that in the paint line. So I want it to be absolutely spot on, but I'll actually hold that hard and press that quite lightly. You can just hear it cutting the tape because it's really sharp. If you're finding it gets sort of caught, or it's not going through smoothly and you're having to push hard, you probably need to get a sharper blade. And it's, you know, and make sure it's that sort of style, because that's really good for cutting. And don't use a Stanley knife because they're a bit too thick. But you should be able to just literally just push down hard on the ruler, spread your hand as wide as you can so that you can keep it as straight as you can, and then quite lightly. You hear that? It's quite light. You need to do both sides to get that off. Like that. And for those of you ladies who are using a painted surface, when you come to do those cuts, again, don't worry too much about how, if you do, you know, go into the wood or the painted surfaces a little bit, because the paint's going to go into there, so it will fill that little, if there's a little tiny groove. The only time you don't want to cut is outside of the lines where you're not going to be putting any paint. So when you're cutting inside this, it's absolutely fine. If you've got a painted surface, when you come to take that off, very, very lightly with your nail, but then use the pad of your finger. Don't pick at it, because that's when you can go through the paint, especially when you've just done it. And I just get hold of the end of it and then roll it back with your finger, because you know, we need to be a little bit gentle, especially when you've just cut that surface. So just be a little bit, you know, tender with it. Oh, did you? Sorry. It's so this is a craft scalpel knife, X-Acto, depending on where you are. And this is a straight pointed blade. They come with all different handles, but it's that specific style. I think there's a link in the supply list so you can see it a bit closer up, but it's got a point and it's straight here, not rounded. Be careful, don't cut myself. Not the rounded type, which are more for surgery, but that I find is much better balanced for cutting. And you do need them sharp. It's very tempting when you start on a design just to keep going with the same blade, but as soon as it starts to rough or fluff the edge of the tape, it needs to change. You can use it for something else. Use it for another task, like flicking paint out when you're fixing things up, whatever at the end, but don't use it for cutting. So Victoria, do you need to think of how you'll refinish the veneer at this stage, or is that irrelevant to your taping design, as in nothing will interfere with the metallic tape design after you've done it? When you say refinish the veneer, is there some fixing up to do? Is there anything you need to sort, like some filler or something, or is it broken? I'm just thinking, nothing. Yeah, just clarify what you mean for me. Oh, bits of filler. Thank you. I've just scrolled down. No, you don't need to do that to the end. So what I tend to do is put my design over and then hopefully catch some of that filler in my metallic design. And then the bits that are sticking out at the end, or even they might be all the bits are sticking out. Then I will do the touching up and blending them in to hide them, and then I'll put my finish on at the end. So we'll be doing all those bits together. When I say together, we'll be doing them together, yes, but we'll be doing them as tasks at the end together. Yeah, so don't worry about them. And if you're fortunate, you might find something disappear in your design, or you can wiggle your design around a little bit to cover them. I think sometimes it's better just to let your design go where it goes, because you just don't always get damaged exactly where you need it, unfortunately. Any other questions? I'll just let me check in here. I think everybody's here. Well, anyways, yeah. See. Can't see the live in the group, just to check if there's some questions. So what we can do for next week, this is just to get you in mind of sort of ways to lay the tape out, things you need to think about when you're putting the tape down, and good sort of practices. And remembering this is just part of the recipe, so you've done quite a bit of the work already with that prep work. And then, you know, that's giving you a really good grounding for the taping of the top. So don't worry at all about, you know, should there be any little sort of errors, because then we'll sort that out at the end. It's sort of a holistic thing. But next week, I'm going to go into detail with some other design things. So we can always, like Sunday as well, we can always sort of go into, you know, recaps of these things, pull up some pictures and go through them in a bit more detail. And I can actually show you some stuff laying out, if it helps to sort of walk through it in a bit more detail. But let's just see. Everybody else ask anything? I'll let all that sink in, let you have a think, go back to your designs, and then you can come back to me with more questions and challenge me to go into more specifics on your actual design. Obviously, we've only got so much time tonight, but we've got plenty of time in the next couple of weeks to walk through each design with you and the best way to do it. Okie dokie. I'm going to I'm going to shoot off then. Unless any last questions, all good. All right, I'll leave you to let that all percolate in, and I'll catch up with you soon. And if you are getting to the stage, if you've got past the painting, you're starting to lay out, please just shout. I'm more than happy just to you know, work through with you individually on that design, and give you advice. So don't feel you need to hang on for Sunday, but we can obviously do more together on Sunday as well. All right. I will see you all soon. Happy painting or taping or whatever you're on to. And we'll catch up at the weekend. Okay. Night all. I will see you back in the group. Oh, hang on. Just double check. Thanks, Kylie. Take care. See you all.